Indian Lake. It's 8 o'clock. Good morning. This is Northern Light for Tuesday, May 23rd. I'm Todd Moe. Facing an influx of thousands of migrants, state and New York City leaders are asking for help from President Biden to waive rules so migrants can get jobs sooner. There's been pushback from some county leaders to bar the migrants. Governor Hochul says her own grandparents from Ireland faced prejudices despite contributing to the state's economy.
Their children, 8 children packed into a tiny house, became business leaders, school superintendents, educators, and a granddaughter even became a governor.
There was a 16-hour overnight rescue in the Adirondack High Peaks last weekend. We'll hear from one of the rangers who led that rescue about the need to be prepared for an Adirondack hike this season.
If you're just going out for a day trip and you're prepared, it's probably okay. But multi-day trips up in that area are just very challenging. That snow is very difficult to travel through, and it just gets you very wet, regardless of how well prepared you are.
Also, most of the time we hear about musicians' live experiences through their music, but sometimes it's important to hear their words. When Lake Placid musician Caitlin Scholl was diagnosed with cancer, she wrote an essay. She'll share it with us. That's all coming up on Northern Light. Stay tuned. Broadcast of Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio is supported by Adirondack Foundation and the Adirondack Birth to 3 Alliance, dedicated to providing all children the best possible start in life, AdirondackBT3.org. And by Citizen Advocates, offering the North Country mental health, addiction, and housing services, plus crisis care, job training, and more. CitizenAdvocates.net/124. This is Northern Light. I'm Todd Moe. Monica Sandreski has the day off. 3 people had to be rescued in the Adirondack High Peaks last weekend. They were on an overnight camping trip when they realized they were unprepared for the deep, rotten snow, wet rain, and cold temperatures. The rescue lasted 16 hours from Saturday night to midday Sunday. Forest Ranger Robbie Meekus was one of the first people to reach the group, who were all suffering from hypothermia. She spoke with our Adirondack reporter Emily Russell about the rescue and what hikers should prepare for going into the Memorial Day weekend.
The conditions on the trail are 3 to 4 feet of rotten snow and very, very wet. And, the initial rescue party has to carry, in our case, we're carrying equipment to rescue 3 people. So that's a heavy pack. It's not a day pack. And we had to go 6 miles in and above 4,000 feet in the rain without knowing exactly what we were going to find. So there's a fair amount of anticipation and stress that goes along with that. And then once, of course, you do make contact with those people, there's the added stress of knowing that you now have the lives of 3 people that you're responsible for, and you're not anywhere close to safety. There's no helicopter that can come and get you, and the next available resources are hours and hours away.
This time of year, what do you think is like the biggest mistake that hikers make when they head into the mountains?
So the first thing that I think kind of went wrong with their trip was they recognized sort of fairly early on that there was more snow than they were expecting, and they weren't prepared for it, but they decided to keep going. And that was sort of their first mistake. They really should have turned around the day before. And then, of course, that mistake was compounded by being stuck in a storm that they did not know was coming. But in fact, that storm had been forecasted for most of that preceding week. So that leave no trace principle of tread lightly, be prepared, is a big one. Be prepared means not just the equipment that you're bringing, but also knowing what the weather forecast is going to be and making sure you're prepared for that weather and not the weather that you have at the trailhead when you start out.
So I drove past the Cascade Trailhead last weekend, and there were just so many cars along Route 73 around there. And, that's before Memorial Day weekend. Do you have any sense what it's going to be like this coming weekend?
So I just looked at the weather forecast. Calls for mostly sunny and low to mid 70s. So when I try to foresee what will happen on any given weekend, that's what I look at. When the forecast is good and it's a weekend, we can expect it to be busy. And on top of that, a holiday weekend, and we can expect it to be really busy. Unfortunately, we've had a fairly cool summer, and we had a late season big snowpack. And those two features are combining together to mean that there's a lot of snow left on the higher summits, particularly on the shaded and north-facing trails. And if you're just going out for a day trip and you're prepared, it's probably okay. But multi-day trips up in that area are just very challenging. That snow is very difficult to travel through, and it just gets you very wet, regardless of how well prepared you are, because it's just wet, rotten snow.
What advice would you give folks who are wanting to get up into the high peaks this weekend?
Well, the DEC still has our mud season travel advisory, so we are advising people not to go above 2,500 feet. The conditions up there are very, very wet, and that's when, hiking up in high elevation with those thin soils, when they're extremely waterlogged and wet, means that you cause an undue amount of erosion. So if you want to hike this weekend, staying in lower elevations, going to visit other areas in the Adirondacks that don't get above 2,500 or 3,000 feet elevation, and we have many beautiful parts of the Adirondacks, I would advise doing that instead of going to the high peaks.
Adirondack Forest Ranger Robbie Meekus speaking with our reporter Emily Russell. More than $8.5 million in state funding will go toward tearing down a former Jefferson County paper mill. Demolition of the St. Regis paper mill in the village of DeFerriot was identified as a, quote, special project. Those are awarded to municipalities where a highly visible and blighted property negatively impacts the local economy. The money comes from the Restore New York Communities Initiative, which aims to revitalize municipalities across the state. According to the governor's office, the mill's property will be turned into a site that will house multiple projects. They'll involve renewable energy and habitat restoration improvements. A new web app aims to help property owners in the Lake George watershed protect the lake's water quality. The Lake George Association's free Lake Protector Profiles offer personalized, science-based recommendations based on a property's physical characteristics. Those include things like slope, trees, and soil. The program aims to address a variety of threats, but its main focus is to prevent excess nutrients from entering the lake through stormwater runoff and failing septic systems. Once property owners access their Lake Protector Profiles, LGA employees can help guide them. And we have more information about how to get signed up on our website at ncpr.org. The State Public Service Commission has launched an audit of a major North Country utility provider. Last week, the agency initiated a management and operations audit of New York State Electric and Gas Corporation and its sister company, Rochester Gas and Electric Corporation. NYSEG serves much of Clinton and Essex counties and parts of Franklin and Hamilton counties. Commission Chair Rory M. Christian said the audit will address ongoing billing issues and consumer complaints and play a role in resolving those issues. The next step is to seek an independent auditor to carry out the process. You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. It is coming up on 10 minutes past 8. I'm Todd Moe. Thank you so much for listening to Northern Light on this Tuesday morning. It's 23rd of May, coming up in just a moment. With an influx of migrants, New York leaders are asking President Biden to waive work restrictions. We have more from Albany reporter Karen DeWitt. Also, a Lake Placid musician's reflections on life and breast cancer. Those stories and conversations coming up in just a moment. This is music by Wrights and Tongue in Edwards, and you can hear more music by regional musicians on our website. Check out the Underscore Project at ncpr.org/underscore. Broadcast of Northern Light is supported by St. Lawrence Health, whose affiliation with Rochester Regional Health means more patient access to specialty care. stlawrencehealthsystem.org. And Long Run Wealth, an SEC-registered investment advisor in Lake Placid, providing comprehensive wealth management, retirement, and financial planning solutions. LongRunWealth.com. Governor Hochul and New York City Mayor Eric Adams are facing an influx of up to 80,000 migrants. In response, the two are asking President Biden to waive a rule that says that migrants have to wait 6 months before they can apply for and get a job. Karen DeWitt has more.
Hochul says the migrants are following the legal process of seeking asylum and they are eager to work. She says farms across upstate New York are facing a shortage of 5,000 workers as the growing season gets underway. And the restaurant industry has cut hours in service due to a severe shortage of waiters, dishwashers, and food prep assistants. The governor is asking the president, a Democratic ally, to sign an executive order. It would waive the 100-day waiting requirement before the asylum seekers are allowed to work.
This is an ask. We're asking again. We're pleading, saying this is a great opportunity here in the state of New York to solve two problems. How to help these people get on their feet and support their families.
Hochul was joined by top business and union leaders who say they are ready to provide training programs and help the migrants with gaining full citizenship, as well as Mayor Adams. Adams calls the influx a crisis of epic proportions that could be eased if the waiting period is eliminated.
Let them work. That is our clear message that we're sending. We must expedite work authorization for asylum seekers, not in the future, but now.
There's already been a conflict between Mayor Adams, a Democrat, and Republican leaders of some upstate counties who objected to the city busing some of the migrants to hotels that were willing to accept payments for them. Some counties have declared states of emergency, barring the migrants altogether. Other county leaders have complained that the city of New York has not told them when and where the migrants are coming. Senate Republican Minority Leader Robert Ord is asking for greater transparency from the New York City and state governments about how they plan to address the crisis.
It is a crisis of and a failure of democratic policies, again, of open borders and sanctuary cities. And there's really no plan about how we're going to deal with it today and how we're going to deal with it in the future.
Hochul took a swipe at the county leaders who have barred the migrants, saying they are adopting bigoted policies based on fear and intimidation. The governor says her own grandfather, who immigrated from Ireland as a teenager fleeing poverty, was a farm worker, and her grandmother, also an Irish immigrant, was a domestic servant. They, like the migrants of the present day, faced prejudices, including signs in businesses saying that Irish need not apply. She says opponents need to take a longer view of what immigrants can bring to the nation's economy.
Their children, 8 children packed into a tiny house, became business leaders, school superintendents, educators, And a granddaughter even became a governor.
5,800 new migrants entered New York City in the past week, and that number could reach 20,000 in the next month. Hochul says a number of temporary housing options are being explored, including erecting tents in parking lots and using dorms at public colleges and universities. The housing is available now that the spring semester has ended, but Hochul says if the 180-day waiting requirement can't be waived, then there will be a conflict in August when students return to campuses. The governor says she's been in close communication with the Biden administration. She says so far, at least, they have not said no to her request. In Albany, I'm Karen DeWitt.
This is Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. It is 8:16. I'm Todd Moe. Thank you so much for listening on this Tuesday morning. Monica has the day off, and coming up in just a moment, we'll hear an essay by Lake Placid musician Caitlin Scholl. Also, we've got a check of our community calendar, and at 8:30, back to more of Morning Edition from NPR. Northern Lights, supported by Guideboat Realty, located in Saranac Lake, where health, history, and the arts meet in the Adirondacks. Your guide to Adirondack real estate, guideboatrealty.com. Nice day, sunshine, highs in the 70s, light winds out of the southeast, and then lows tonight in the 50s overnight. Tomorrow, 80-90% chance of rain, so might want to get outside today and enjoy that sun and maybe a walk in the woods. Tomorrow, showers, then mostly sunny skies. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. As we head into the Memorial Day weekend, it's going to get gradually milder, highs in the 60s tomorrow and Thursday, then a high near 70 on Friday, and highs in the 70s with sunshine on Saturday and Sunday. Cool start to the day. We started out with some frost on the grass and temperatures in the 30s right now in Canton, sunshine and 48 degrees. A couple of years ago, we added the music of Lake Placid musician, writer, and artist Caitlin Scholl to our Underscore project. It's a space on air and on our website where we share the music of many talented North Country musicians. She had just released her album, Following the Light. Most of the time we hear about a musician's life experiences through their music, but sometimes it's important to hear just their words. When Caitlin Scholl was diagnosed with breast cancer, she wrote an essay titled This Luminous Life and shared it with us.
Last year, just a few weeks after turning 39, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I'd known something was wrong for some time, but I didn't know what it was. It wasn't that something was wrong with my body, or I didn't think so at the time. It was more of an energetic issue, an ominous feeling, a sense of dread, or that something was just off. I blamed it on the pandemic, the growing sense of disconnection in my marriage, the isolation from friends and family, and the intensity of lockdown with 2 small children, a career that wasn't flourishing as much as I'd like. I couldn't quite figure out what was causing the undercurrent of distress I was feeling, but I knew nonetheless that something was indeed terribly, maddeningly wrong. So when I discovered the lump in my breast one evening while waiting for the shower to warm up, an interesting mix of terror and relief shot through my system. I knew. The moment I found the lump, I knew what it was. This was the terror. The relief, though, that was unexpected. In the same instant that the shock of terror drove itself like liquid ice through my veins, another sensation occurred. Something like an exhale. I had found it. the source of the problem, a physical manifestation of all the discomfort I'd been in for the past few years. And while I was horrified at what my discomfort had turned into, something much more deadly than I had ever let myself even begin to imagine, on another level, I wasn't surprised at all. Here it is, my heart seemed to say. This is what's been brewing under the surface this whole time. You knew something was off. You were right. As terrible as it is, this cancer in my chest was proof of the invisible, indeterminate imbalance I'd been sensing all along. Proof that I could indeed trust my intuition. And even though this disease meant I would have to face the unimaginable, its presence almost instantly became an affirmation of my own deep knowingness. Now, I'm not saying that because I was sad or depressed or stuck or confused, as so many of us are, that those things caused my cancer. I'm not in the business of victim blaming, especially when it comes to illness and wellness. I can no more blame my cancer on my sadness than I can attribute someone's Parkinson's disease to a lifetime of shyness or random emotional outbursts. Still, as soon as you go public with a disease, as many of you know, there's a long line of people ready to tell you exactly why you're sick and what to do about it. At best, these well-meaning strategies might resonate and offer actual solutions. At worst, and most commonly in my experience, there's an unwitting underlying message that blames the unwell person for their condition. Well, if you'd only hang upside down for 10 minutes a day, your spine would be back to normal. Or, oh my God, you're not taking B12? You've got to take B12. Your autoimmune condition is going to disappear. Oh, and stop eating gluten, for God's sakes. If only illness and wellness were that simple. Rather, that's almost never how it works. Sometimes there's no reason why one person gets sick and another person doesn't. In so many ways, life is just a big game of luck. And on some level, we know this. And it scares us. And this is why we're so quick to try to fix any sad or bad or unlucky thing that happens to us or the people around us. If we can just fix the scary stuff, maybe life will be more in our control. If we can become fully optimized humans, maybe our lives will turn out how we want them to. Maybe we'll be happy. Maybe we'll live forever. Maybe bad things won't happen to good people. Maybe we have nothing to fear. What I can tell you about all this is that, for me, it was actually in facing the possibility of death, really looking it in the eye and sitting in that terror, that ironically brought me so much closer to the life I had been longingly imagining during all those long, sad years. It's a life where my inner world and outer worlds converge. A life where my deep knowingness is recognized and honored. A life where telling the truth becomes more possible and beauty becomes more vivid in the face of our suffering, our discontent, our confusion. A life where the worst has happened and now there is nothing else to fear. A life where we are free to truly live. A life that is utterly luminous.
Caitlin Joel is a musician, a writer, and artist who lives in the Adirondacks, and you can check out more of her music. It's part of our Underscore project on our website at ncpr.org/underscore. Time is coming up on 25 minutes past 8. You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio, and I want to just say thanks so much for joining us this morning, and stay tuned. Coming up at 8:30, news from NPR, and at 9 o'clock, off to BBC NewsHour from London. Yeah, you heard just a second ago, there's some music that I want to share with you next by another Lake Placid musician. I got this in the mail just a few days ago from Steve Lester, who is a guitarist and is a regular listener to North Country Public Radio. He sent me his new album called Northern Hearth, or at least one of his favorite albums called Northern Hearth. Contains music cover tracks and music from really around the world, everything from Brahms and Bach to Villalobos and lots of other, Mitchell and Loudermilk and so on. I want to share one of the pieces from this album. Again, this is Lake Placid guitarist Steve Lester. That's a tune called Streets of London, and performed there by Steve Lester, a guitarist from Lake Placid, from his album Northern Hearth. And thanks, Steve. Thanks for sending that in. I appreciate that. Some great regional music from Steve Lester of Lake Placid. 29 minutes past 8, and just want to, before we're off to Morning Edition from NPR, I do want to remind you about the Great Adirondack Birding Celebration coming up June 2nd through the 4th at the Paul Smiths College Vic. It's a great opportunity for birders of all ages and skill levels to learn more about our bird species and habitats in our neck of the woods. There are birding trips and conversations and lectures. There's everything for the beginning birder to those who want to go loon watching on Lake Clear Pond, those sorts of things. I found the information on the Paul Smith's Vic website, paulsmithsvic.org. The Great Adirondack Birding Celebration coming up June 2nd through the 4th. Thanks for listening to Northern Light on this Tuesday, May 23rd. I'm Todd Moe. Be well.